Welcome to this meeting of the Garrett Park Town Council on Monday, March 11th, 2024. The time is 7:35. Call this meeting to order. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda? Not hearing any, we will consider those, consider the agenda approved. We have also before you the minutes from the February 12th, 2024 council meeting. These minutes were brought to our attention prior to this meeting for review. Are there any changes that need to be made to those? And if not, we will consider those approved as presented. Great. Let's see, presentations by residents. Lots of residents. Oh, we got hands raised galore. Yes, sir. Please come on up, Mr. Schwartz, and give us your name and address.
Good evening, I'm Ken Schwartz, 10919 Claremont Avenue. And I have a comment that'll probably take 2 minutes. And it's food for thought on the town operations budget. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees, and that might be the case with the operations budget and the town council. So I have a question for town council members. And I think Caleb probably knows the answer. Barb, I'm sure, knows the answer, so I prefer they not answer it. It's really whether you know the answer to this question. If you take the 2023 final budget, the actual budget, and you compare it with the 2024 operations mid-year budget, what is the percentage increase in the resources provided? We can, if you, this, I would think would be a type of statistic that would be of use to the council to know whether the increase is 2%, 5%, 8%.
The revenue or the cost?
Operations.
This
Cost.
expenditures, operations.
When you say
expenditures.
cost,
I mean,
that includes capital operations.
operation, okay.
It's page
Does
2.
anyone have an idea on the council? Would anyone like to take a guess? 5%, 10%?
Well, if you're
15%?
looking at
Well,
actual spent, it looks like it's double.
double.
No?
No.
Maybe I'm looking at it wrong.
So would you like to know the answer?
Yeah.
22%,
Okay,
2023 actually. 2024 mid-session, mid-year, as about to be approved by the council. Increases in every major category. And I would think that might startle you. That's a very hefty increase. And one that is not sustainable over time, as if you continue to increase at anything like that pace. Also, I know at your retreat, or I should say your work session, you talked about opportunity cost. There's an opportunity cost because if you're spending it on operations, you obviously don't have those resources for capital. The actual increase in capital in operations is 274,000 on a base of 1.2 million, which was obligated and spent in 2023. So it's just something that I think you folks should think about. When I used to work at the Federal Office of Management and Budget, we had a phrase, we had a mantra that said, when everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. And I think you're getting close to falling into that trap of everything being a priority, not only on the operations side, but the capital side. It may surprise you to know that again, in the mid-year budget on capital, you have 1.4 million in capital, not town hall, 1.4 million. That's a lot of spending on non-town hall capital projects. And you can always, of course, you can always reprogram those resources. So I've had my say and I'll sit down with that. Thank you.
thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Who wants to be next? Naveed? Jack? Jack, you're in person. Name and address, please.
Jack Mandel, 11314 Rokeby Avenue. I'm speaking today concerning a new business item on the gate at Kenilworth. I think Naveed might also be speaking. Naveed, I apologize if I steal some of your points. You had a chance to go. So bear with me. I can send this. I put it in the form of a letter a while ago, but I'd like to read a few, what I consider salient points. It will take about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I'm against it, opening the gate, for a lot of reasons. One is timing is not an issue, should not be an issue. It's really, it is about 15, if you live at the bottom of Rokeby, you know, towards the estates, it will take you about 15 to 20 seconds longer now than going up Kenilworth. So I hopefully that is not an emergency amount of time, and that shouldn't be an issue. That said, then what is it about opening the gate? And I could think of 2 reasons. One is access by emergency vehicles, and 2 is by sharing the traffic load. There's a friend of mine who was a battalion chief, Montgomery County. He lives at the corner of Rokeby and Orleans, Jim Resnick. He was second in command in Montgomery County. I asked him, he walks that almost daily, or at least weekly now that his dog isn't around. But I asked him specifically, is this a hazard for access? He said, no, it is not, never has been, never will be. It's not. The fire department, if you could say he represents the fire department, does not believe that that is a hazard. Therefore, then it's a sharing the traffic load issue. And so is in fact this a legitimate, is it access, lack of access for those people who have to go up and down Rokeby? Is that really an issue? So let's talk about sharing the load. What is it about that? So it's a calculus issue. And what is the calculus? So what are the benefits? The benefits are you share the load. And what are the deficits of doing it? There are many deficits for doing it. I happen to have kind of a singular view out my window at the corner of Rokeby and Kenilworth. I look at the little cul-de-sac that's now created by having the gate. On a daily basis, maybe not when it's raining out, but almost every other day, there are always people standing out there, enjoying themselves, sitting there with strollers, bikers, dog walkers, especially dog walkers nowadays. They'll gather there, dogs will hang around. It is a safe space. There are no other safe spaces unless you go down to the bottom of Rokeby. So it is a safe space for everyone to use. And I do not want you to discount the importance of that safe space, because it's a psychological thing as much as anything else. If you take that away, then people just don't have it. I mean, you won't miss it, except those of us who see it every day will see that it's kind of a quality of life issue that has been taken away. I'm sure that Naveed and I know Joe May, who lives on Rokeby, also kind of sent around an email, which I'm sure will be forwarded to the council at some point, talking about the danger, the nature of danger of creating a ongoing two-way traffic situation on Kenilworth. The street there is not as wide as any point that I can find on Rokeby. So it goes down to around 18 feet, where the narrowest point on Rokeby I could find is about 19.5 feet. But also you have cars that are parked in a driveway on Kenilworth. That means they have to back out of the driveway, and now they're going to have to look both ways for more constant traffic coming in both directions. And oh yeah, guess what? We're putting in Yandell Grove. So you're going to increase the numbers of both pedestrians and cars. By doing this, you're really creating a hazard that does not need to be created. In 2016, we took a kind of a localized survey of people who live around the street, both on the bottom part of Rokeby, on Kenilworth. How do you feel about this? This was done by the previous mayor because she lived across the street as I did. And nearly everybody said they wanted to keep the gate closed. There were a couple people who said that they wanted to open the gate. And clearly, if you live between Kenilworth and Albemarle on Rokeby, you have more traffic because cars can't go up and down Albemarle. And so those people might want it. But my guess is if you explain to them a lot of the circumstances, they might change their mind. Obviously, the cost issue is going to be significant because you might even have to widen the road next to my house. I really don't even know
And I think you have to pave it too.
You have to, right, you have to pave it.
The previous
um,
mayor made sure we didn't pay that. She asked to not pay this.
Right,
Yeah.
right, which, and I concur. And so these are my points. I know Joe May had the same point about danger. It's very dangerous. You know, you're putting in a lot of money into Yandell Grove. You're gonna have, you want people to show up there, and now you're gonna really put them in definitely a higher state of danger. It is not a wide road right there. It is a narrow piece of land. People are gonna not see what's going on, and something is gonna happen. So I urge you to keep that gate closed.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir. Naveed, name and address, please.
Naveed Nakui, 11311 Kenilworth Avenue. Good
Can you
evening,
turn them up
council
some?
and mayor.
I can't.
Turn that
Hold on,
Could you
Naveed.
hold on? It's hard to hear you. We're going to work on the audio.
Can you guys hear me now?
Better.
That's better.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so Naveed Nakui, 11311 Kenilworth Avenue. Good evening, council and mayor. So like Jack, I stand against the lifting of the gates for removal of the gate. It is a very, very, very narrow street at the point where our house is and just before the gate. If there's one car parked, another car just driving by one way has a hard time. And we have a lot of pedestrians in the middle of all that. So the street just doesn't support thorough traffic. It's very narrow. I do not think the gate poses any kind of emergency access. If the gate is left open or unlocked as it is now, it can be easily removed or moved. We can fix that up a little bit and put a sign on it that it says it's not locked, it can be open, maybe just to clarify that. So that's two, and then with the Yendel Park, whatever might be there, we think there's going to be more traffic and just more people walking and foot traffic. So again, it just doesn't make sense to open up that path of road there. So that's all I have to say. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Donna, I think I see you there. Were you wanting to speak up or just?
No, I just, we sent in an email and I know that the town council members and the mayor have that, and, you know, our Jack and Nick and Naveed know where I am, and Debbie and I are on it, and just, I'm sort of curious, and I apologize for missing the very beginning, about what the arguments are for opening the gate.
We haven't gotten into it. This is a topic for later in the. later in the
Gotcha.
meeting. So we're listening to you all.
I gotcha. Okay, and you have my email, right, Joanna?
We do, and we have it printed out for all of us.
Yeah,
Mayor,
thank you for doing that, Barb. If-
Questions, or is that not allowed? Well, I am curious
if you have a
because
particular
these
question.
three residents, Jack, Donna, and Naveed, all live really close to that gate there.
Yes.
And so
Right.
one thing I have heard is that there are frequently delivery trucks in particular, but other vehicles that come down to the gate and then back up out of the area, and that presents a safety hazard. So I'm wondering if any of you have observed that happening.
Yeah, Jack.
I just want to
So
understand what the
I
neighbors
think-
are observing.
I think I would say that there are cars that back up. Delivery trucks go through the gate. They have no problem. They now know, anybody who has been through Garrett Park once already knows that gate is unlocked. They just get up, they go open it, and 90% of the time they close it. The trash trucks use it Monday and Thursday. They open it, they go through it, they close it, and everybody's fine.
Do you
So-
ever close it when people leave it open?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Donna, did you want to add anything else? Sorry, you're muted.
So
You're on mute, Donna.
Did you mute her? Try again? Nope.
okay, well, I can weigh in on terms of trucks backing up. No, the delivery trucks, the UPS and FedEx, they turn around if they have enough room to turn around and go back out. And I haven't seen any trucks really back out. Sometimes they go through my driveway. They use as a nice circle, but I haven't seen anybody back out all the way.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the only thing I was gonna add is that, we do have the two driveways essentially of the Yandell property, and many of the trucks do turn around in those little mini driveways. And I'm just being very candid here about it, because I think we should be, that's how we should be. My suggestion on this subject, though, is the sign just at the corner of Clyde and Rokeby, or sorry, Clyde and Kenilworth, could be more clear about the fact that there is no throughway. And so trucks or cars that are trying to deliver something to the end of Rokeby would not come our way. But I just think that it's not a major issue. Occasionally there will be a large truck. And often what happens is that one of the neighbors runs out and tells them they can open the gate. So I don't know if there's a way to better communicate that that's a flexible gate. I think that was one of Jack's suggestions. But that would be my thought about that.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one more resident, Seth. It is.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious, the reason that it is there in the beginning. So
Can you, name and address, please?
Seth Seidman, 11402 Rokeby Avenue. I live right 2 streets, past there, 2 houses rather past there. And, my son has like a special education bus that comes to pick him up. Their normal bus driver is fine. He comes down Rokeby, pulls in there, he can make a U-turn. But anytime there's a substitute, most of the time they come down Kenilworth. And then, if I'm there, I can open it up. But like I'm rushing home to do that because then they back up and they won't let them off there. So they have to like back up all the way around. And it just seems like it's a hard place to turn around. And I just don't understand the reason for it there in the first place. It doesn't seem like it's preventing any safety issue. It seems like both roads are relatively narrow. Rokeby up further and Kenilworth between Clyde and Rokeby. It's a hard place to turn around. So, if you get stuck there.
So you're saying that you'd like the gate open all the time?
Yeah, I'm questioning what the purpose of it is actually too.
Okay.
So both. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else joined us? Does not look like it. Does anybody wish to speak on a different issue? No? Okay, thank you all for that. We will bring up this council discussion later in the meeting. So I guess, thank you, and we'll move on. Go ahead, Charlie.
Mayor,
ahead.
I'm sorry I didn't think of this earlier, but I do think it would be advantageous and customer friendly for our residents if we were to consider at this late point to amend the agenda to move that item of business to next on the agenda, rather than waiting and asking our constituents to wait until the end of the meeting for that topic.
I hear what you're saying. We were not planning on taking any action on this tonight.
I
So in
understand,
that sense,
but for the conversation, we're asking all of our
Right.
residents who've come for this one topic to wait until the end of the meeting, when they may have reasons why they really can't stay for the whole meeting.
okay,
So I'm just asking for some consideration. I wish I had thought of it earlier, but I did not.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I would, if we choose to do that, I would prefer to allow town manager's report to go first. To get that out of the way, because there's a lot of information that comes in. But if you all want to amend the meeting, this is kind of.
Yes, second.
Okay,
Yeah, second it.
Do you wanna-
I'll approve it.
okay,
So it would just move it up in front of action It would
Yeah, move it
up
to between
2
the town
spots.
manager's report and the action items.
I know, and we don't need it. Barb, is there anything that you'd want to say to this?
No, I think included in your agenda packet is just some history that the town archivist had pulled together. I'd gotten an inquiry from Seth actually about the history of the gate. I wasn't familiar with it myself. So I think the background is included in the excerpts from past town council meeting minutes to the extent that it exists.
Okay, all right. So then let's, I guess let's proceed then with that part of the conversation. So Barb, I will note that the Kenilworth conversation, the gate, the time is 7:55
Thank you.
for that. Okay. Would you like to do your manager report first, or do you want to?
It doesn't matter to me. I think if you all want to go ahead and talk about the gate, since you do have people present, that's fine.
Is that your preference to just do the gate conversation?
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So this was, there've been, I've gotten questions over the last couple of years, just sort of on occasion, and I just thought that since this is something that we haven't discussed in many years in a formal way, I just wanted to bring it up and have us look at it and either affirm the gate and keep it where it is, or reconsider its placement and take it down. It just doesn't hurt to look at those things every once in a while. Things have changed a lot since this was last considered in 1985.
Given that I think that the history information was provided to the town council, but it was not posted on the website, so it wasn't made available.
Was it-
We just get like.
Barb, was this not put on the website?
It's not on the website. Or at least it's not with the agenda packet that's posted for tonight's meeting.
It was in the email that was sent around to everyone.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm working off the website one. so. Okay, so it was made available public. I was just wondering if we should have Barb give a very quick summary of what was there. In terms of the purpose, because we had the question from a resident as to what the purpose was.
I remember reading it. I'm still curious what the purpose was back in the day. Is that it wasn't clear.
Would you like me to try to briefly recap, Mayor?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So going back to December of 1954, there was a petition from 13 residents of the lower block of Kenilworth requesting that the town permanently close the northerly end of Kenilworth Avenue. Council discussed it, decided at that time it would be unwise to permanently close a dedicated connecting street. And so basically the decision was made back in December of 1954 that a temporary barricade would be built at the end of the pavement at the north end of Kenilworth. There was some further discussion then in September of 1957. And basically the decision to, basically they discussed a number of streets, actually, the closing of several dedicated streets. Cambria was noted, Claremont, Oxford, and Kenilworth. It was agreed by the council back in 1957 that such streets should be closed by barricades if such closures seem necessary and desirable for reasons of safety to vehicles and for pedestrians. Council approved the erection of barricades on Cambria, Claremont, Oxford, and Kenilworth as noted above in the minutes. There was then also some discussion back in September of 1957 about kind of signage that was raised. And basically there was an agreement to place signage at the last intersection before the actual dead end. Then there was another discussion in May of 1961. And basically there was a meeting to inspect the physical conditions complicating the proposed road reconstruction at the end of Kenilworth. There was some discussion about a turnaround space. And I think if there was anything. There were a number of residents who participated in that meeting. The minutes reflect that there were approximately 20 property owners who attended. The general consensus and opinion expressed by those citizens was that the turnaround would cause more trouble than it would solve and should not be built. It was generally felt that Kenilworth should be improved within its existing specifications and should be barricaded at its end. There was discussion about a simple resurfacing of the existing pavements, which it was noted that at some places narrows to a single car width. There was an alternative suggestion by some neighbors that Kenilworth should be joined with Rokeby if the simple improvement described above was not feasible. But they went through some back and forth. And basically, there was a motion to set aside the council action of July 11th, which was not noted in Claire's minutes, to clear up the property, to place a barricade at the end of Kenilworth, and to make no further improvements until the planning committee makes its report to the entire town. That motion was unanimously passed. Then you fast forward to July 10th of 1961. The then Mayor Friedman requested that the barricade at the north end of Kenilworth be erected as soon as possible. In August of 1961, there were several council members who also agreed that the barricade should be erected at the north end of Kenilworth as soon as possible. Claire also included some comments about the dedication of the Brunson Memorial Bridge, which was in 1970, she just included some comments from the mayor. Fast forward to January of 1985. And basically, there was discussion about the barricade at Kenilworth and Rokeby. Nothing was formally introduced. It was not a legal hearing. The subject was being discussed because of questions raised following a fire at the Bach Henson residence at 11402 Rokeby on December 13, 1984. A letter of complaint had been filed with the Kensington Volunteer Fire Department by an adjacent neighbor, 11404 Rokeby, regarding procedures used for handling the fire. There was some discussion apparently with the Kenilworth Fire Department, specifically the fire chief. Chief attended the meeting, answered a number of questions, and Chief Bagley, who was the chief at that time back in January of 85, confirmed, quote, that no detours were taken either via White Flint or Kenilworth Avenue by the Volunteer Fire Department. Chief Bagley also indicated that he did not perceive a problem in getting to fires because of the Kenilworth Rokeby barricade. There was some discussion. There were some concerns expressed by some residents that there had not been enough prior notice that the discussion was going to take place. Some back and forth with different officials about leaving the barricade either in place or opening it up. And basically there was a motion that the barricade be kept closed, and this motion failed for lack of a second. There was a referral then to the Traffic and Safety Committee, who would provide a recommendation to the council. I did ask Claire if she found anything in any files regarding the Traffic and Safety Committee about this matter. She did not, so it's a little bit unclear what exactly happened then. There was also a reference in the minutes of June 10th of 1985. Councilman Payne inquired whether this would be an opportunity to bring the Kenilworth Rokeby Avenue dead end up to a standard street, include opening it up. The council agreed without objection to defer the subject to a later date, and then there's nothing after that time.
It's a later
Thank
date,
you.
all right. So Steve, you've mentioned in the past, you've talked about this from a historical preservation perspective. I don't know if that's something that you want to speak to. But in terms of making progress and having somebody kick things off, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I can give it a whirl. I mean, it's just it was interesting to me when that question came up, and then I was always curious like why that gate was there, and still trying to piece it together why they needed a gate. It was would predate when White Flint Park was there. And another thing that is interesting about that section, if you look at the historic town map that's in Penn Place, that whole northwest corner of the town, I think when you pass Albemarle, I think there's one more lot that was in the original plan from that. Everything else beyond that, everything all the way down on the northwest side of Kenilworth, all the way around, and all of Rokeby past Kenilworth wasn't really planned to exist. That was supposed to be a parkland. That was pretty common when these kind of towns were designed as like a garden suburb. You would take something that maybe was a stream that was really a difficult place to build houses, and we're seeing the after effects of that with the stormwater questions. You would kind of set that up as a parkland, and you would put the house lots on the higher ground. But I guess with development pressures in the 50s, that end of Rokeby was planned out as subdivided in 1952. It was literally the same year as the Plavenik extension on the east end of town was done. It was a little bit after Richterville was done, which, so both Plavenick and Rokeby were planned in 1952. Richterville was planned in 1946. So it just seems odd to me. I never understood why there would be a gate versus like when, like the Rokeby subdivision plan, it showed that street going around. It even with all this historic, looking back at old minutes, it never quite made sense to me why you would have a gate at the end of that street. So I think historically it'd be more accurate to restore it and just have that curve go around. This is kind of my thinking on it.
To make it too wide enough for two cars or leave it the width that it is and repave it?
I think a lot of the streets or all the streets in town really should be a consistent width. That was the original plan. You had a 60-foot right away. There were a couple exceptions. So like Waverly was planned to be 80 feet and Argyle, I'm not really sure why, that was also planned to be 80 feet. I think maybe they wanted to be more of like an arboretum street. This is my guess. But I think there's a lot of merit to just making all the streets consistent all the way around town. So that street does neck down to, I think about 19 feet going down Kenilworth. If you pass Albemarle, almost all of Oxford is 19 to 20 feet. So that probably should have been widened when SRTS was done. It just wasn't, mostly due to budget reasons. I think the other one is just a correction. Rokeby actually narrows down to 18 feet. I know it's 18 feet because I measured it during SRTS with another kind of argument like this, that, and we have narrow streets and why make things more dangerous with cars, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just not really seeing the merit in that. I feel like there's more merit in just being consistent around town.
So you don't think that the park in Yandell and the pedestrian traffic that's used to having no through cars there would warrant continuing to keep the gate?
Like we have pedestrian traffic all around town. So, and people meet and stop in the streets almost all the time. That was the big argument against SRTS for opponents of SRTS, is that people just walk in the streets and meet in the streets. So I think in most cases that happens. Ironically, I think where it gets difficult is where SRTS was fought and stopped on Kenilworth, like further up Kenilworth, where it was shortened. But and Yandell Park, I mean, it's really, so far it's been kind of envisioned as like just a grove of suburban forest. I'm just not sure how many visitors are really going to get there. So,
And that also provides that sort of quiet space where people could meet, gathering space just right there.
So it sounds like several people have conveyed the importance of this quality of life, open space, gathering area. But there may be a countervailing issue of access from at least one resident. And I would like to know how many people feel this lack of access as a result of the gate and the barricade. So it seems to me that would be something that would be important for us to consider going forward.
So I can tell you, going over in that area, it's an annoyance. I mean, I'm not going to say that there's lack of access, but it's an annoyance. And I don't.
It's an annoyance when you're in a car driving.
Yes.
Right.
But I don't know whether, I mean, it's almost like the assumption is that it should be closed, which I guess makes sense because that's what status quo, but it's almost like I challenge the notion that we should assume that the default is for it to stay as it is. Does that make sense? You know, like.
Just because historically it's been there for a long time.
Right.
And people like it. I mean,
Well,
several people
yes,
like it.
Right.
there are people who do like it and there are people who don't.
So, a couple of things I will say is, first, if for some reason we are gonna open it, then that street needs to be redone, because what you've got there is a pathway, it's a bunch of junk. And I'm talking about between the gate itself up to Rokeby. That needs to be redone because it's just
crumbly.
It's crumbly asphalt. It's God knows how old. It's probably just laid on top of dirt. So that's going to be a problem right there. Street width wise, I would think we would want to at least have street and gutter through that area if we're going to doing it. But the thing I also see as the second point is that, you know, you get these people who go racing around town, especially if they happen to turn down the wrong street and they're trying to head to Black Market or head the other way. And I think it becomes a traffic calming situation because
To leave it there?
to leave it there, everybody basically who's local probably knows or can know, should know, whatever, that the gate is open, and more than a few times I've opened it, and closed it behind myself if I've had to. But I think that right now it helps serve as a traffic calming measure. And if we are gonna have to do something, I don't think we can just decide to flip it open tomorrow and leave it open without having to do something on that street because
You take the posts out that hold the gate, probably.
yeah, whatever. I mean, it just, we can't, without doing something for that patch of ground there, I think we're gonna have a problem. And so I would say that if we're gonna decide to vote to do this, then we need to look at having Clark Azar come in and do an assessment to figure out what it would take to bring that up to Montgomery County road standards.
Increase our capital projects.
Kind yeah.
I think that would be the thinking though. It's like you wouldn't just do it right away. It should be like the longer term thing is to kind of just correct those kind of things around town. Don't just do them one off. But yeah, I think the longer term goal really, I feel very strongly about this. It should be a consistent kind of 24 foot of, you know, maybe it's not 24, but something at that range, but almost all the streets in town are that. And it gives you a pretty consistent expectation. And I think it honors the original town plan, which I don't think the gate honors.
So I want to come back to you on that, but Jerry?
Well, I just had a few questions. One for Stephen, and I'm sorry if you said this. I appreciate hearing the history on the original plan. Has this ever been a topic for the agenda for the Historic Preservation Committee?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we could take that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it might be helpful to have the committee kind of look at it if they have time on the upcoming agenda to look at that. The other question is, the town, it sounds like we're hearing described that there's a sign on the gate that says it can be opened, it's open. I know that it used to be padlocked. I'm not sure how deliberate that decision-making has been, that the gate is now open and there's an invitation posted.
No, I
that
think
it
it's
can
just kind
be
of like
open.
those who know.
It's
Right.
not, there's.
Yes.
Put a sign on it.
No,
So to finish my question, it was unclear to me. I thought maybe there was an indication that there was a sign.
Is there a
But
sign?
I question whether it makes sense to have a gate there to be a visual closure, yet have it be something that can be opened from a safety standpoint. Is it safer, and this is just a question, not really an opinion, is it safer to have traffic flowing through that gate sometimes unexpectedly, because people who are standing there chatting in the street are not used to traffic coming through, or to suddenly have traffic coming through? So you see what I mean? Like if the road is open all the time, people who may or may not walk in the street there know, hey, at any time a car might come through there. But it might be more surprising that a car comes through when normally the gate is closed. Just a question I'm raising in terms of us thinking about it. I agree with Phil. You don't do this overnight. It's something that would require some planning because the road currently isn't meant to take that traffic. It's not, currently set up for that. So it would need to be something we think through. And I think also we would need to think through, because I can hear the argument both ways when it comes to the future Yandle Road. I can see that having that be a dead end is actually potentially detrimental because more people will use the parking area for Yandle Grove, whatever it may be in the future, as a turnaround spot, making the park even less safe. Rather than through traffic might be more safe for the park area itself. But then again, the argument that we heard here tonight is that some people think that it would be safer to not have through traffic near the park. I can see it both ways, but I do think it requires some additional thought and consideration.
and
Steve,
budget.
And budget, yeah.
yeah, so Steve, if this is part of like a concerted effort to re-honor the original plans of the town, what's the path for opening it without also doing major construction? And understanding that we would have to redo the driving space, the street, but without opening it? Is there a middle ground, or would you rather that we do nothing until we're prepared to take on the bigger project of either widening it or doing something more significant?
Right, my guess would be it makes more sense to eliminate it if you can make that section match the worst case of Rokeby, which is an 18-foot pathway through. I mean, as of now, you could flip the gate and put it on Rokeby and have Kenilworth go through and just turn left to get to the tail of Rokeby and be no different, because they both have like an 18-foot bottleneck on it. So I think that would probably be the thing that would make the most sense, is kind of put Kenilworth back to like a real street and then have it be connected through to Rokeby, but then eventually fix Rokeby. I think the reason why it necks down to where it does is there's a tulip poplar. It's really close. So it just kind of, it was curved around that tulip poplar and it's down to 18 feet. But when the tulip poplar is in decline or dies, then that street should be opened up as well.
So with all due respect, it seems like the question isn't how do we uphold the historical intentions of the founders of Garrett Park, but who is this current situation useful for? I mean, we should try and be utilitarian about this, because it seems to me that the original intention of the plan for the town, first of all, is subject to updating, and second of all, gosh, I mean, it's hard to interpret per se. I mean, it's great that to have that view and to have a holistic view of how this might fit into that, but I think more important is how, is the present, and how do people on both sides, with both positions, reconcile their use of the space? Is there some sort of compromise? Is there an obstruction of access for people who need services that for some reason are harder to get because of this gate? Or are the people who seek to have a continuation of this community space and gathering point, are they right? Are they the majority? I mean, maybe we should look into this and put a higher premium on them.
So
Unless we're breaking laws or codes, which apparently we're not, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder, just to make a straw
Yeah.
man argument, like, why don't you just make, okay, go ahead.
No, you can. Oh, just one comment on one thing Todd said. I did forget to mention, I think it was Jack mentioned a survey that had been done, an unofficial survey of like back in the 2016, unofficial survey back in the 2016 timeframe. We do have the means to do surveys that works pretty well to help us out with the town hall decision making. So we could consider a survey that could gather information from everyone in town, but we could also ask them to provide street names so that we could get a sense of people near. I think we did a similar thing for the train, and we got a sense of people near the train versus away from the train. And it did give us a little bit more perspective.
So to some extent, it feels like, getting into a nightclub, do you have the passcode, the secret passcode to get in versus maybe this is, sorry, Kayla, like if you know the secret passcode to open the gate, then you get to use the privilege of having that be a pass through. But if you don't know the secret passcode, then you have to go around. And that just doesn't feel, for it being a public space, that doesn't feel equitable to me. So Seth's son's bus driver knows that he can just open it up.
It also may
So-
not be allowed to, based on some sort of.
You can't, no, the
Rule.
bus are actually goes around. You cannot open
Okay,
it.
so, but
You
But
can't
it's-
get out of the
but-
bus.
right, so I mean, there's just like this sort of like,
That's the
the
problem.
people who know that they can open it get the benefit of the convenience. But other folks who don't know are sort of
Have to go around.
have to go around, which I get is not, it adds 10, 15 seconds or something like that, but that's not the point of what I'm,
We
my.
can put a sign on both sides saying you can open this gate, but that doesn't solve the problem of the bus rider who can't leave the bus. I
Okay,
mean, it solves some people's problems, right? It's no longer a secret passcode.
Right. And Seth, I don't know your last name. I'm sorry, I missed it the first time. did note it's not the regular bus driver that's an issue. It's the substitute bus drivers. And any of us who have school age kids know that right now substitute bus drivers are frequent, right? It's not a rarity anymore. And I'm not suggesting I know how I would vote on this issue if it were an action item at this time, but I think I've heard enough to say, I think a little further study and consideration is worthwhile. To me, a survey would be pretty inexpensive. We've proven we can do that in-house without expending cost. The engineering work would be cost, so maybe save that for a later point if we get to a point of doing some internal
Or get a
review.
very crude estimate.
Yeah, maybe ask George Miller too. Give us a crude estimate. He's in-house.
So Steve, you had something else you wanted to?
I mean, it was just, admittedly, it's a straw man argument, but it's kind of the town in the 50s, I guess more in the 60s, maybe it made itself an island. And I think the mayor for 1970, he said it well. It made it like a medieval fortress and protecting itself against suburbia. And you could count almost, it almost fills up two hands how many dead end streets there are around. And that just added like two. So it kind of makes me wonder if, like, to just play devil's advocate about the merits of that gate, why don't we just make all of our streets dead ends and just have, 10 more gates, and everybody can just stand in a street and let the delivery drivers come and open up our series of gates. I mean, I just feel like it's just, I think it's just hard to justify to me, like why we have that versus just, it's at the very corner of town. It would be another, street that people will go around pretty slowly. And then it's just, while I do value like the, like honoring the history of the town plan, I think it's interesting to note, like, a lot of these plans, they were really made like it was in the 19th century. So they weren't cars, like it was pretty fashionable back then.
No
Like,
UPS trucks?
no UPS trucks either. So even when all these streets were closed off, there weren't really that many UPS and FedEx trucks coming around, or deliveries from Amazon, so on and so forth. So it's different than it was even in 1985. But then back in the 19th century, it was kind of like in vogue to, get your horse and carriage and go like out for like riding around these kind of like curving roads. And that's kind of the aesthetic they were going for. So it's interesting to me now how we have 130 years kind of closed off that kind of area would be able to drive around now. But
It does feel different to have only, to not be able to get through to other neighborhoods or to not be able to get into Garrett Park. That feels different to me from not being able to get around Garrett Park.
yeah, it doesn't seem, like you said, equitable, I think, to all the 300 and some households here. While you can acknowledge it is a great benefit, I would love to have the street next to me closed off to traffic, but it's not.
And
Like,
Strathmore?
well, I tried to close off the parking lot and I almost got hit the other day. Still, no, it didn't happen. And it was interesting. Another thing too is I think one of the things Barb cautioned about that is it could take people by surprise if you're coming down at speed and you don't see something that's dark, like a bar that somebody could really get hurt, especially on a motorcycle. And that's kind of what we're doing with this gate. So I was thinking about the irony of that too.
The gates got reflectors on it, I believe, doesn't it?
Well, we
So-
put that on the other 10
so
gates
I
we put up. So.
I think that what we're saying is we need more information. And I certainly.
I would support a questionnaire.
Survey.
I think that what the people who live in the town would like is something we should take into account before we make a decision.
And proximity to that intersection should be geocoded or referenced or some other.
Somehow, right?
You can do it the way I did it. Or you can look at my survey, but I kind of had a way of splitting it up.
Todd's a survey guy, so is that something that you could help generate? Todd,
Help Kayla.
Sure. Sure, if I get a copy of it before.
no,
a few
but
days
we'll-
before, I mean. I
No,
think-
no, help
You
design
can,
it.
no,
If you can help
no,
design it.
help design it, help
If you can help
design it, help
yeah.
design the survey.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure we're gonna use GIS, right? I think what we
Well,
can do is at least ask people how
We-
close.
Councilmember Eisenstadt, why don't I send you an email tomorrow following up and we can talk through preliminaries? I don't anticipate doing GIS at this point. I think there are simpler ways to code it.
Yeah.
Let's not overly complicate it. We're interested more in the public opinion
Yeah.
and preference than we are
Perfect.
concrete GIS drill down.
I don't think it should all be, at all be limited to just people that have a stake in it.
Well, no, we all
Be
have.
more town hall. Town
But
hall.
we'd like to know where people, it would be helpful to know where people live
Just,
Yeah.
in the,
in
in the discussion.
what I did was I basically did north side, south side, east and west. So I broke everything up and do you, in my case, do you border the train line? Or in your case, you could do, are you, within X amount of houses or something? I mean, that's how I did it, and that's,
We'll get,
Okay.
Right.
Great.
Yes, second thing. second.
Yeah, that's what I would.
Okay.
Even
support
if it
that.
means having to do it, the second. it.
so then let's, great. I think we've got a conversation started, which is what sort of what, that was the goal, was to get the conversation started. And, okay,
Gather more information.
all right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, residents.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So the time is 8:25 and let's go with the town manager's report, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll start off with the monthly financial report for February. Some of these comments are ones you've heard repeatedly, but I'll just go ahead and note them for the record. As you know, income taxes have been running very high in large part to an extremely high payment we got in November, which was also included a reconciling distribution for returns filed, in prior years. One of the things we talked about at your budget work session on February 28th is, what's going to happen with income taxes for the remainder of this fiscal year. As I had noted at that time, we typically receive sizable income tax payments in February, as well as in, let me see if I get my months right, May and June. So there was no slowdown whatsoever in February. The payment we received, which was roughly $132,000, was actually marginally higher than what we have seen in prior years. So I only bring this up since you'll be considering budget amendment number 2 later in your meeting. And I think the income tax estimate I had given you originally, I feel comfortable with based on what we're seeing so far. Investment revenues are continuing to exceed the budgeted amount. Since your last meeting in February, Mary Rutke, our accountant, and I did another analysis of our cash flow needs, kind of looking at upcoming projects and their likely timing. So we did place additional funds since your last meeting with the Montgomery County Investment Pool to maximize our investment earnings. And we had also, placed monies with the Montgomery County Investment Pool earlier in this fiscal year. Other receipts are also exceeding budget for all the reasons we've talked about in the past: the sale of a pickup truck, a claims reimbursement we received for some light poles that were damaged on Strathmore. Also, I just wanted to make a correction for the record. In my report last month, I indicated that we had received a final COVID reimbursement payment, which in fact we have. That did get posted to February. It came in on February 1st as opposed to January. So just wanted to note that for the record. On February 21st, the County Historic Preservation Commission considered the town's historic area work permit application for the Waverly Sidewalk project between Montrose Avenue and Penn Place. As a reminder, this application addressed basically the replacement of the sidewalk, specifically the widening, as well as the removal of certain trees that our arborist has indicated would not survive the construction process. The County Historic Preservation Commission did approve our historic area work permit application with one condition, which is simply that we provide a site plan showing the location of the 3 trees being removed. Those were noted in the application narrative, but they wanted to actually see that on a site plan.
Or can you explain to me what has to happen to make a decision to what trees are gonna be replacing those trees and who's gonna plant them and when we're gonna do it?
Yeah, so those, the replacement tree selection has not been made. Those will be made by the town's consulting arborist in conjunction with the Arboretum Committee. Obviously, one of the things he's trying to do is to basically add, diversity in the trees throughout town, but more importantly, also make sure that the trees don't have a wide root spread, because then all it does is tear up the sidewalk again. The trees being removed will be done by the contractor for the sidewalk project. Mr. Normandy's preference was to basically separate the actual planting of the trees. He felt more comfortable handling that outside of the construction process itself.
Can we get that started though? Because I really would like this project to be completed and not just constantly in construction.
Sure, I
but
can,
doing
I don't,
piecemeal
Darrell, has
phases.
there been any discussion of this at the Arboretum Committee that I'm maybe not familiar with?
In terms of
The actual selection of the
selection
trees, not that I was
I
aware
don't
of.
think so. The committee is looking at a tree list, but it is not specific to.
I think it's just a
the
spring tree
Waverly side.
planting, not to Waverly, correct? What I will do, Lisa, is follow up with Phil Normandy and just ask him what his timeline is for doing that. As far as the project itself, as you know, the Waverly Sidewalk project is being bundled with other construction items. I had checked in with Jason Azar last week to see when I would actually get a draft of the bid package to look at. His goal was to try to get me something by the end of this work week that I can also share with Ron Bolt, who always reviews our bid documents just for legal sufficiency. So if things kind of keep moving as Jason has indicated, what I anticipate is that the bid would go out sometime in the next 2 weeks or so, assuming, there's not, Ron doesn't have any significant comments, which I think they've worked together long enough that I don't expect that.
And they're gonna take the stumps out when they remove the trees.
Correct, right. So I would anticipate that we would have bids in time for you all to make an award. Most likely at your meeting, I think either in April or May. I did let Jason know that there was a chance that you might be having a special meeting prior to the election just to wrap up the budget process.
Right.
And that might provide an opportunity for you all to make an award if you're so inclined.
Thank you.
And just as a reminder, I think you all are aware of this, but there will be a second historic area work permit application. Once a light fixture has been selected, we will need to go back before the commission for that.
And how are we gonna select that light fixture?
Where things were left, and it looks like Phil is eager to say something, but I'm going to let Phil handle it because I think he was going to be meeting with representatives from the Historic Preservation
Exactly.
Committee.
So where
We
does
just
it
haven't done
stand
it
with
yet.
that?
As I've done it yet. What?
What progress?
I haven't done, I just haven't scheduled the meeting yet, so I just need to hurry up and get that meeting scheduled.
Okay, so that's not going to preclude us from building the sidewalks.
Not at all.
But, right, but it,
Right.
right.
We'd like-
But we don't have lights selected, so we
Could
won't.
you include the prices when you
Yep.
have of the fixtures in addition to the selection options?
Yeah, and so Phil and Stephen are aware of this, but after the last meeting, I had at Phil's request sent a copy of his presentation to the chair of the Historic Preservation Committee, Nancy Walls, ask, is this something that she wanted Phil to meet with the entire committee, or did she want to handle it in a subcommittee? She elected to have a subcommittee initially work with Phil, and then I think they will bring that back to the full committee for consideration.
Okay.
Kind of moving along, there's been some discussion about the former Yendel property. This will be briefer than what I have in your memo, but you may recall that as part of the state clearinghouse process, because of the grant that we have, the Maryland Historic Trust had the opportunity to offer some comments. Long and the short of it is that they requested that we have a three-party memorandum of agreement between the Maryland Historic Trust, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, which is the granting agency, and the town, basically to mitigate what they deem to be adverse impacts on the Garrett Park Historic District by removal of the house. There were 2 items that are covered in that memorandum of agreement, which has been executed in the latter part of 2023. One required action was photographic documentation of the house and the property to provide an accurate record of the resource and its setting. Additionally, we are required to plan and develop a public history project that focuses on the contributions of women in the conservation history of Garrett Park. And there's a number of ways we can accomplish that. I did want to share with you that we had sent in the photographic documentation, and it was received by Maryland Historic Trust on February 5th. We did receive notification on March 6th. They have a 30-day review period, that they had accepted the documentation for its inventory records in Medusa, which is their online database of architectural and archaeological sites and standing structures. So of those 2 items, we have checked off one of them. So the remaining task is to work on this public history project. Our town archivist, Claire McDonald, has been conducting research, identifying women that might be good for us to highlight as part of that project. and pulling together biographical information. So we actually have several years to satisfy the requirements of the memorandum of agreement. Clearly, we had to take photographs of the house before it was demolished. We were actually, that was something we had to do. So we are making good progress, and I have told the Maryland Historic Trust that we hope to satisfy these requirements long before the couple years that we have to do it.
What's the status of the grant that you got for the park and what
We
is
have it.
the process? We have it, but what is the process of getting somebody in to design it and
Um,
figuring out what we're gonna do? there?
Yours truly has to find time to write a request for proposals. I'm hoping to have that done by the end of this month.
Great.
I'm a
So
little
what-
further behind. One of the other pieces of the project is obviously doing some removal of, invasives, bamboo eradication, some tree pruning. I think we talked about this perhaps at your last meeting, but we had gotten a quote from Empire Landscape, which is one of our 3 competitively awarded contracts. I have signed that work order and we're just waiting for a start date.
Oh, good.
Barb, what will be the basis for the request for proposal? Will that request be for design services for the park?
I would have a suggestion for design and then also some assistance with probably construction management in terms of helping us put together the bid package, helping issue it on the street. I think you all will likely recall this, but one of the requirements, since we're taking what was a single family home site and turning it into a park, we are required to go through the mandatory referral process with Montgomery Planning. So it's not totally our call in terms of what happens on that site. Montgomery Planning has to approve it. So I will be noting in the RFP that we are looking for some assistance from the design firm in helping us get through that process. I have some familiarity with it because Tacoma Park went through it on a number of occasions. I think one of the things that I've talked to Montgomery Planning about is trying to balance how we get community input, but also make sure that what we're looking at as concept design, similar to sort of the process you went through for town hall. I would imagine a couple options that we can then get community input on. At the same time, we need to make sure that whatever we're asking the community to comment on and say what they like and what they don't like will be acceptable to Montgomery Planning.
Right.
So the discussion I've had with the person who's in charge of the mandatory referral process is that we will come up with some kind of concept designs, and rather than go initially through the formal mandatory referral process, that the design firm and, town, most likely me, will basically be able to have an informal consultation with them so that we can kind of get a read that anything that we come up with as potential concepts is acceptable to them and would actually be approved before we take those out to the community. Because I would hate to have people get excited about something only to find out that Montgomery Planning won't approve it.
Okay.
So I would see some element of design certainly too early, including helping us get through mandatory referral. And then probably helping us put together the bid package, similar to what Clark Azar does for us on construction projects. They actually put together the bid documents. We certainly review them. But then they basically help manage that process in terms of getting bids, evaluating them. And then I think depending on the complexity of the design, which, I don't think will be overly complex, do we need any assistance with construction administration services and helping us actually implement the project?
That's helpful. So just kind of estimating broadly, the next point where we would invite public input would be once we have design firm
Hired, right.
hired. And then we would,
Probably get some input from the community on the front end of that to help formulate the designs,
okay, thank you.
if that's helpful. Town hall renovation, I did want to mention, and this funding thing seems like it's as the world turns from week to week. So when we met on February 28th, based on discussions I had had with, at that time, senatorial staff, as you might recall, we were attempting to clarify whether we had an avenue to apply for congressionally directed spending, otherwise known as earmarks. At that time, there did not appear to be an eligible project category based on my discussions with staff members in Senator Cardin and Senator Van Hollen's office. Last, I guess it was Thursday, because it was the start of my couple days off. I did hear back from an inquiry I had made earlier that week to the Historic Preservation Supervisor for Montgomery County Planning, trying to reconcile, if you recall, the town of Garrett Park is on the National Historic Register, but what does that mean for individual structures? Because our only path forward for earmark funding is a program through the National Park Service called Saving America's Treasures. I forwarded the email that I got from the Historic Preservation Supervisor to the same staff members in Van Hollen and Carden's office to say, how does this change things? And they said, you should file the application. So that's about ready to go. Kayla, at the same time, since I was off for a few days, also made an inquiry through the Maryland Historic Trust. They apparently have a different idea about whether or not we're eligible to apply for earmark funding through the National Park Service Saving America's Treasures programs. So I did want to let you know that, some new information came in after the agenda packet went out. At this juncture, I have one question left to answer on the funding application. I have the letters of support that are required. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with filing the earmark application and just see what happens.
How much can we get?
The maximum for that particular, so each of the earmark authorization programs have different funding levels. This particular program, the maximum you can request is $500,000. So the application, like I say, it's just about done. I probably need about another hour's worth of work on it. I'm going to request the entire amount. And just see what happens, but I did want to let you know, there does seem to be a question now whether we're eligible or we're not eligible.
Does the state have a say in federal
They,
eligibility, or is it just their interpretation?
they don't. We were trying to basically, because I have to admit, when you have an entire town that's on the National Historic Register, but individual buildings themselves are not landmarked, that was sort of the question. The Montgomery County Historic Preservation Supervisor's email, which I did forward to Carden and Van Hollen staff members, basically her opinion and her understanding of the program, because she was familiar with this National Park Service program, was that individual structures in Garrett Park are considered contributing resources to the overall district, which is the town, which is on the National Historic Register. The Maryland Historic Trust basically indicated her opinion is that individual buildings have to be landmarked for this particular program.
Right,
So
so we're asking for federal funds. It's up to the feds to decide who they want to listen to, right?
they will review it. So basically, I don't know how the entire process works. I know that the applications that this is on the senatorial side. At this juncture, Congressman Raskin's office has advised Kayla that there's further work in the House in terms of setting deadlines and things like that. The Senate side, and particularly Van Hollen and Carden's office has, actually the deadline was last Friday, they had extended it to the 15th. What they're going to do is when they get the applications is they did this year for the first time, I think, just develop a joint application process, which is great because now you only have to file one on the Senate side. But they will sit around, look at the requests they get for each of the specific funding authorizations that are out, and sort through the applications. Once again, we have this question of whether or not we actually are eligible for this program for which we're submitting an application. But they don't typically, they told me, get a lot of applications for this particular pot of money because there is this restriction. So, we'll just toss it out there and see what happens.
The
Kayla,
deadline would be, an award wouldn't happen until August, September.
yeah, so basically there's a whole different steps, but it's all tied to the federal government's FY 2025 budget. So there's a whole process in between, but we would know, assuming we have a valid application, they anticipate award notifications being made in the fall of this year.
It sounds like it's not a lot of effort to put that, not a lot of labor to put it in. It's kind of a long shot, yeah. I've worked on projects that have gotten that grant, but
Yeah.
they're all, I can't think of any that weren't like a nationally registered building with a
Yeah, if you think of
ton
just
more historic
the
significance.
very
than that.
title of the
Yeah.
program itself, not just in any way being dismissive of town hall, but it is Saving America's Treasures. So it does have a certain loftiness in the title. Kayla is also, the Maryland Historic Trust has several grant programs. The one that we are probably most eligible for is a capital grant funding program, and that has a maximum award of 100,000, and Kayla is looking at that grant application. I know that I think Lisa has sat in meetings with me and others that kind of questioned whether the rigmarole was worth it or not. I would say that if we're successful in getting funding through the Legislative Bond Initiative program, there will be state clearinghouse comments just like they were with Yandel. So Maryland Historic Trust will have the same opportunity to comment. So from my perspective, we might as well at least throw our hat in the ring and see what happens.
Yep.
So that's
So-
sort of, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna,
Yeah, go ahead.
gonna kind of not sidetrack, but stick on this topic of the town hall renovation, and point out that during our budget work session a few weeks ago, we talked about how to close this gap. There will be a significant gap between what we currently have available for town hall spending and how much it will cost. And,
A bond issue.
and one of the things that Barb had explored for us was how much it would cost for us to take out a loan, do a bond, have a bond issued for this. And I guess I want to get a sense from you all of next steps. I kind of envisioned a month ago or so that at this meeting tonight, we would say, you know what? We're comfortable with taking out this bond or not. We're comfortable with the loan or not, but kind of even tonight, making that decision. This was my thinking a month ago. And that even tonight, we would be able, at the March meeting, we would be able to say, let's proceed, or let's decide that we're scrapping this or whatever. So I guess I don't know, at what point will you all be comfortable discussing, making a decision about, you know, it's sort of a gamble. If we decide to proceed with a bond application, first of all, we wouldn't need to make the application. We wouldn't need to take out the loan for a full, you know, for a year. And we definitely by then know if we're going to get these funds. But I guess the question is, do we believe in this project? Do we want to proceed with this renovation? Even if we don't get money from the state, even if we don't get money from the federal government.
We get zero.
If we get zero,
Well, the
are we
amount of the
still-
Bond is a big number, because
right, so the big gap, the maximum, it seems, is $1.7 million, which is a lot, that no question. But that is also the worst case scenario. Now, it could be that we're in a worst case scenario environment, but you know, our options are to scale back the project and do less, to not do it at all, to put it on the shelf until we can come up with more money. But, you know, I need to get a sense from you all of what pace. Do we want to wait until we hear from the state, which would be maybe 6 weeks from now? Projects get more expensive. Do we want to, is it valuable to move forward sooner than that? Is it more valuable to wait until we have more information? I mean, what do you all think? Go ahead, Todd.
I just think that, I think as you depicted it as a scaling back and, you know, between one extreme and the other, and I would support not pursuing a bond. I would support using the ARPA funds and the designated funds in our budget for this project, which is about half of what we ideally viewed as receiving, and figure out what we can do with that. I mean, I'm sure we can do quite a bit.
Okay.
I was very interested.
Can you support?
I was very interested when Barb pointed out that we've paid off the bond from the renovation of Penn Place. So the funds that we used for that, how much of that payment, now that we're not paying that bond off anymore, would be available for this project? So I was kind of interested in that in terms of, can we afford to pay a bond payment, a principal and interest payment for 20 years for $1 million, and what would that do to our budget? And I'd like to have those numbers kind of presented before we make a go, no-go decision.
I agree. That would be helpful background information or analysis.
So helpful to know. So helpful to know how we would make these payments, like what
Right.
trade-offs they would have to be, or, you know, like
Where would
how
the
adding
money
that
come
to our,
from? Right.
Didn't
How would
there
it,
was between 60,000
And 120, something like 75 to, yeah.
Yeah,
Depending on what plan we took and how much we borrowed.
correct. But we didn't find out what the impact would be on our budget.
Well, I mean, we'd have to make the decision. That would be one of our operations.
Right.
That would be one element, and that would actually just ultimately probably lead to less
Of
handover
other-
to other capital budgets.
Pay for this.
Like the renovation of, I mean, there's a question about what to do with the space near the pool, right? What we would like to do with that, and
Right.
that would be a medium-term opportunity. But it seems to me if we do everything at once, then we lose some of those opportunities.
Well, there's also funding sources for the park next. to
In
the
a different
pool.
way, yeah.
Right,
Um,
so it's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it's like that with almost every issue, but I think one of the things I was talking about or trying to point out when we had that budget discussion is we tend to roll a couple $100,000 into capital every budget year. That's a surplus to operations, and it's just going to take a haircut off of that. And I think that's the big picture and the decision. So to not have that haircut, we probably have to look at either doing less on capital or maybe sharpening pencils on operations as we go forward.
Well, don't we still need a more solid estimate on what this thing's gonna cost? I thought
I
that,
think we have it.
We don't have real bids, I keep
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
until we get real bids from real subcontractors, we're really not gonna know what the real cost.
so
Yeah.
we have about as good as we think we're gonna get. I thought we were gonna go another step on
Typically what you do is as you're having a project go to, and I think Stephen mentioned this some time ago, but as you go through different stages of the design process, I mean, right now we're at the conceptual design, so I think it's probably about as good as it can get, but say you decide to go forward with the scope of work in concept 4, typically you will do it periodic intervals of just kind of updating your cost estimates through a professional cost estimator as the design is more detailed. Stephen, is there anything, this is obviously what you do for a
Yeah,
living,
that's
so.
correct.
Value
Yeah.
engineering.
Yeah.
Like that process.
Yeah.
Correct. As you get more detail in the drawings, more and more of the contingency drops out, and a lot of things that the professional estimator now is saying, I just don't really know what it is. I'm just going to give a blanket cost per square foot, or just throw a lump sum of, it could be as bad as this. They'll have more definition. I think Greg Wiedemann was kind of saying the same thing too,
Yeah,
as you would
he
get
did.
more and more clarity as you go through.
Yeah, I
that
think the last,
There's no
come back.
question that the costs that we've been presented are rather conservative.
I would
Which
say
is-
very conservative.
which is a positive. If,
Right.
like if we look at it in a doomsday worst case scenario and we're looking at a shortfall of 1.7 million.
Mhm.
So okay, so Todd raised the issue of only doing a project with the amount of money that we have. I don't. I don't favor that. I think that this is a generational project that will be used for many years in the future, for decades in the future, and that there's nothing wrong with asking people in the future who are using this facility to pony up for it.
The only difference is that when we did Penn Place, the funds to pay for the bond came from the rents of the building project.
Fair point.
So we didn't ask anybody in town, my understanding, to actually write checks. Now, if we do
Yeah.
this bond and we can't cover it in our budget by skimming up some other things and having more revenues coming in and all these other things that we've been talking about, then we would be asking the town residents to come up and to actually to pay for the cost of this.
Right,
And
not
that's a
in,
big difference.
and not in the rate, no, not in a tax
Not
increase,
in
but
the-
in the sense of
right.
like future projects.
It would
would
come out of
be
the
slower,
budget so
right.
that other things couldn't be paid. And part of that would be dependent on interest rate environment and the amount of money that we need to borrow at the time, whether we get some of this funding or not. So I would be in favor of it to a point. Not the whole amount,
mean,
personally.
I don't know how much more to scale back the project. I guess maybe that's a lack of imagination on my part. and
I mean, it seems like there's the internal aspects and then there's the external structural aspects, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
seemed to me that if we worked on the internal, I mean, that may be a false distinction, and maybe what we should do is figure out what will fall apart first and fix that,
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the, I mean,
well, but that's not, I mean, what's gonna fall apart like that? I don't,
Well,
that's not a way of honoring this building,
well,
this
I know,
town.
right,
is-
let me just finish and
Yeah.
say that what I mean is look at the parts that need the most work and do that work.
So,
And
so
just
stage
accept that, you know, that not everyone in the community uses this building, and that most people do use pen clips, that everyone goes into the post office. I mean, how many people actually come here? I mean, I don't think we ever established that, did we? I mean.
We kind of did by survey. I think it was, most people were in the 1 to 4 times per year, come here.
I think if it's renovated and it's really nice and we've got a nice facility, I think more people will use it, but I
That's a
believe
good
that.
point.
I think it'll become a real asset to our community.
I just speak, I know as the newcomer to town,
No, no,
hasn't
no.
been working towards this vision for a long time, and I think that's got some negatives, but also
Also
maybe
some
some
positives.
positives.
Sure.
So I think that I would just say, if I were moving to town today, I would, or as I did 5 years ago, frankly, I didn't really know about this building until we started meeting here.
Right.
Everyone knows about Penn Place.
Well, part of that was we were coming off COVID for the last several years.
Well, I
that
came
was
here
a
a
big-
couple of years before COVID,
Yeah,
I
but
should say,
Yeah.
but you're right.
Penn
So-
Place has more uses. This is really just a meeting hall, and it's just,
it
I'm
just-
kind of torn because I feel like in between, like, I like the idea of making it best we can for future generations, but then it's a shame, like, we're really limited. This is a really poor site for this kind of a building. It's just a narrow
It is
lot.
what
It's like
it
a foot and a half off that side. So it's kind of like, we can't really expand the program too much. So it's kind of tricky. Like, you run into like an issue of like overspending, potentially overspending on something where you can't really change the use, notably over time.
Well, I think the kitchen improvement is major, and I think the backspace is major. You know, I think we're doing some things that'll make it better, but it's still gonna be what it is.
Yeah, backspace is really just gonna move the stuff to the back. I mean, we're not gonna really gain anything. I mean, when you really look at the
No,
plans,
They just need to talk.
I don't know how we're gonna gain a lot because the backspace, we're moving 2 bathrooms back where the other stuff is. We're gonna change the kitchen somewhat. And we're gonna eliminate these bathrooms up here, but I'm just wondering how much additional functionality are we getting in the plan that we've got? I mean, yeah, we'll move some stuff back and forth, but what are we really buying?
So, I guess what I'd like to decide tonight is when do we want to take this up and talk about this? I mean, yes, we're talking about right now, but do you all want to wait until we hear back about the state bond? Do you want to wait until we hear back from the federal bond? Do you want,
You mean the
Like-
grants?
The grants, yes.
sorry, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
sorry.
Do you think we have enough information could you run a set of numbers that would show us what the impact to our budget would be with $1 million or $1.5 million bond?
It'd be it'd be
Yeah.
120,000.
It's about roughly, obviously, as you pay down principal, it's just like your mortgage, but on a 20-year bond issuance at interest rates as they were the day that the state ran them for us. For a $1 million bond issue for 20 years, it's about $75,000 a year.
And it's $1.5 million.
For 1.7 million, it's about $130,000 a year.
Which is 10% of our budget, right?
Yeah.
Let's put it in real terms.
So the question is, do you think we can still fiscally be
Yeah,
responsible?
what I
and
would-
afford it?
Well, and I think, not to answer a question with a question, but I will somewhat. Clearly, we don't know what, if anything, we're getting from the state, and we'll know that in about, roughly 30 days. So that'll be one consideration. As we talked about on the 28th, and I believe this has been known, there is going to be a shortfall that the town is going to have to figure out how to make up. Even if we got every single grant we applied for, it's a matter of how to what is the size of that gap and what are the opportunities to fill it? The one thing I do just want to mention is obviously you all had agreed in concept on concept 4. That is the basis for which we are applying for grants. What I cannot tell you is that if you fundamentally alter the scope of the project, is that funding now jeopardized?
Right.
I would imagine, for example, the grant that Kayla is going to be working on and submitting for Monday. That is a Maryland Historic Trust capital grant. I'm sure one of the things that doesn't mean we'll get funding that they will likely find attractive is that the tentative plan now involves restoring the front of this building to what it was originally. If that's not something we're doing, I believe that funding application is much less attractive. So I don't think you're going to figure it out tonight. I think as you get into, your schedule to consider introduction of the budget ordinance at your meeting in April. That'll be a couple days before the end of the legislative session. So I don't know that we'll have a definitive answer on, the state grant funding, but at least you'll have a better idea, I think, of what does the kind of scope of the budget look like in terms of what are the operating revenues, what are operating expenses, what's available for capital. And then I think at that juncture, we'll all be in a much better position to sort of look at the impact if you were to bond something and how those debt service payments come into play. Joanna and I were
Grant.
right. Joanna and I were talking, earlier today because as most of you know, we were at an offsite hearing together. I'm not suggesting this. I'm just saying it's doable. Obviously, the maturity of a bond and how the duration is something that is a matter of discretion. The debt service schedule. Yeah, the debt service schedules I had run were 20 years. I will say that is the kind of the customary thing that I probably have worked with more during my career. Obviously, if you shorten it to 10 years, the payments go up. If you extend it out to 30 years, which may be, I don't know that that's the outer limit of what you can do through the local infrastructure program through the state, but that's probably is starting to get there.
25 years.
You could do 25 years, you can do 30 years. Obviously, the longer you extend it, the payments go down, but interest goes up overall over the life of the issuance. So my suggestion is we sort of get to that meeting in April where you're looking at the budget and you actually have some solid numbers to look at.
So we're just gonna kind of wait till we,
See where we are.
Yeah,
all right,
But
Just
will we
remember
get
to-
grant knowledge by that time?
we don't know.
we don't, it'll be coming very close because the legislative session is within days of ending.
Yeah, but when
Yeah,
I
you had some
when
discussions, I
talked with,
know.
Delegate Solomon, it sounded like it was gonna be like the last.
Right at
thing
the
that they're
wire, up to
working
the
on,
wire.
If there's anything.
if there's anything left at the very end, so we may not at that.
Yeah,
One
Um,
other factor I was kind of forgetting about until just now too is we used to have the debt service on Penn Place, but I think it was at least the way I heard it, it was kind of a pledge of the government at that time to be able to kind of backfill that with the revenue of Penn Place. And I know a couple of residents were really bothered when the previous mayor, started jettisoning some of the rent revenue. But we probably should look at it kind of comparatively with that. We were getting, I think, almost half of the debt service back with black market and post office and
You
the
know, that's-
offices.
That's not.
But that's not going to
desired.
happen here. So I'm just saying
Yeah.
it makes the effect like double.
yeah, and I
It's the same.
can't, speak entirely to what was known. So the debt was taken out in 2002, the black market lease was signed in 2004.
Mhm.
So I don't know to what extent those conversations with black market as a tenant were firmed up by the time the town made the decision to take on the
I guess.
debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Cor-
always known that.
correct.
I'm thinking of more recent too, like I can't remember what the number was that we had for debt service. It just kind of, it ended just a couple years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you look at a budget from say 2018, 2019, you would see in there how much was held for the debt service on Penn Place and then how much black market got in rent. There were 2 tenants plus
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
post office of four rent streams total. And now we
Right.
would have,
Mhm.
potentially the same kind of amount of debt service or similar range per month
Without-
with no tenants.
And we're not paying any more debt on Penn.
Correct.
Correct.
So we
Okay.
still have that revenue, but.
So,
Yeah.
We're not deciding.
right, we're not deciding. I mean, I think you guys, it sounds like y'all still want to we're going to keep it
Yeah.
We're just gonna stay in our current space for a little bit longer. Okay. All right, Barb, sorry. continue,
That's
please.
okay.
Renovation, town
I'll
hall,
just be very
plans.
quick, because I know you've got a couple other items and your meeting's supposed to have ended by now. We are still at a standstill on the town office. And I call it permit purgatory. DPS has asked for, basically had asked for some comments that could only be addressed by an MEP firm. We basically, a couple $1,000 contract retained AJ Engineers, Inc. They were the ones who basically did the MEP work for the Penn Place renovation in the early 2000s. So we're still trying to work through the permits, and nothing's happening on the town office renovation right now. Lastly, just some comments about the maintenance team. Phil Normandy has identified some small invasive trees and shrubs that are located on town-owned property and town right-of-way. So basically, Frank and George are sort of taking care of removal of those items as time permits. I had a meeting with George and with Phil a couple weeks ago, the other Phil, Phil Normandy, just to talk about kind of notification process so that people kind of aren't surprised when they come out and find something gone in their yard. So we'll be doing some signs that will be sort of posted at those locations in advance of that work being done.
Barb, just to go back to Penn Place for a minute, the space in the front that we were thinking about renting to a third party.
Yes, we call it tenant space B, the smaller one.
Correct.
Yes.
So when can we start thinking about telling people it's available, getting ready to get somebody to pay us rent to use it?
Yeah, where you all left things before is that we would finish the town office renovation, and then you all would regroup and have a conversation about what you wanted to do with tenant space B, whether to rent it. The direction was, and which we have done, was to have that space painted, to install some new lighting, to basically put down new flooring. That work has actually been done. While we wait to see whether we can ever resume work in the larger of the tenant spaces, we have been using tenant space B currently just to be able to store things, because eventually we have to get everything out. I think once everything's done, Lisa, and that space is cleared out, we'll schedule something. Joanna and I had talked about
To
that.
discuss.
What you want to do with
Yeah.
that.
The sooner the better, obviously.
Yeah, right now there's stuff in it, so no one could get into it. Yeah.
Are we gonna have to make any changes to any of the electrical work or anything based on what these guys are asking?
It doesn't appear to be based on the comments that were in the DPS system. Like, for example, one of the things since in tenant space A, we are, essentially creating a conference room, creating an office. This was work that was done previously, but like we had to show where all the sprinkler heads were, and basically, they're evaluating whether or not it triggers other changes. In this case, they haven't made any comments about that. I think the plumbing part of it is because of the creation of a new kitchenette and the, conversion of what is the kitchenette now. It doesn't appear that we just have to check all the boxes, and they're looking for someone who has the appropriate license
Right.
to make, to do that, which is understandable.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
There was one thing, Barb, about the maintenance activity. Is there anything that we can talk about in terms of the changes coming there?
I think, as you all are aware, in the current year's budget, we budgeted for 6 months of the year to have contractual support. As everyone is aware, Butch Frost, at one time we had 3 maintenance folks. Butch Frost retired after an illustrious career with us, not quite 2 years ago. So we've been using contractual assistance to basically make up that gap in resources. This year's budget contemplated half a year of contractual help, half a year of a third staff person returning us to that level. We're a little bit behind in the recruitment, which has been okay. But we do hope to have that position filled. And we'll be conducting secondary interviews in the coming weeks. Nice. So that concludes my report, unless there's any questions from anybody.
Okay, not hearing any demands for questions. The time is 9:09, and we move on to adoption of ordinance number 2024-1.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll keep this brief. There are 2 versions of the The ordinance in your packet, attachment 1 is the ordinance as introduced on February 12th. Since your meeting, there were a couple very minor changes I was suggesting specifically, as I talked about earlier. We have, made some changes in how our funds are invested. The ordinance as introduced assumed an increase of $63,000 in investment revenues after walking through everything with Mary in terms of both funds we had available and the change to moving some funds from savings account to the Montgomery County Investment Pool. I'm in attachment 2, I'm recommending that you increase the projection for investment revenues to 85,000. So another $22,000 in revenue from that source. Additionally, in other receipts, as I mentioned earlier in my report, we did get the additional last payment for COVID related expenses, the reimbursement, which hit the February report as opposed to January. It was just a matter of a couple of days, but it was, material. So I am suggesting that you make a slight adjustment in the projection for other receipts, which is account 5.4. The ordinance is introduced, assumed a $32,000 increase. I'm suggesting a increase of $35,000. So those two changes means that there would be $25,000 in more of an additional revenue that would basically, flow through and be available for allocation to the capital budget. Attachment 2 assumes that additional $25,000 in revenue and increase in the capital transfer would go to town hall. So I would encourage you to kind of adopt the version in attachment 2 to recognize that additional revenue and that adjustment in what it goes to town hall.
So how do we do that? Because this is an amendment to the ordinance.
Correct. I think someone could make a motion, Joanna, to basically amend the ordinance as introduced to reflect an increase of $85,000 in the projection for investment revenues and an adjustment in the projection for other receipts from $32,000 to $35,000.
What she said.
Yeah, and the allocation would go to town hall.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay. So, are there any questions about this? Or can we get a motion to amend the?
I had a quick question.
Yes, please.
I don't know. So I was looking at this February 24th, the last page, the reserve fund summary
Yes.
in your budget, Barb.
Mm-hmm.
And on the top, you had reserve fund summary of $1,399,183.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the bottom, it said total reserve as of 2/29/24, $1,141,252. And I just didn't understand why those two things didn't put together.
Because they're flowing down. So basically the primary difference between the starting reserve balance as of January 1st and what it was as of February 29th was the fact that we've spent down some of the ARPA funds. Those funds are actually reserved until such time as they're spent.
Okay.
That's the primary reason.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you. So somebody needs
So
to
we
make
need a motion. basically
To
saying-
amend initially.
A motion to amend the ordinance as introduced. And then what Barb said about 85,000 and 642.
Yeah, and the town hall.
Town hall and hike. All right, who wants to make the motion to amend the ordinance as introduced?
I'll make the motion, but I don't have the language.
That I can
The motion with the language.
I can fill in the language.
But we all agree that we recognize, we know what the language is that we're agreeing. Okay,
More money.
those in favor?
Yes.
We can Google.
Those in favor of amending the ordinance as introduced?
Aye.
That was unanimous. Okay, and now a motion to adopt the amended ordinance.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the amended ordinance.
I'll second that.
Okay, Bill and Jerry Lee, all those in favor?
I,
Aye.
That was everybody. Excellent day. All right, moving on to the next item, ordinance number 2024-2, requiring a real property sale disclosure.
This will be very quick. At your meeting in February, you introduced ordinance number 2024-2, basically to provide for a disclosure of Town of Garrett Park regulations in conjunction with the sale of real property. Your motion to introduce the ordinance back in February did include several modifications to the ordinance draft. Specifically, you asked that language be added to the ordinance requiring that a copy of the signed disclosure be provided to the town, that you wanted the ordinance as introduced to include language providing a kind of general layperson's description of town right-of-way, and also the addition of language that would make it clear that town right-of-way maps are available on the town website. I apprised the town attorney that the ordinance had been introduced with those amendments, asked him to basically incorporate language into the ordinance, which he has done.
did we want to also say something about protecting the trees in the right of way?
Right, that was done, the prior amendment that you had done. So if you look at the version of the ordinance that is in your agenda packet, this reflects the town attorney's, if you look at section 406A in the ordinance, a sentence has been added to say that a copy of the fully signed disclosure must be provided to the town within 30 days from the date of the closing. So that was kind of checking off one of the boxes.
One quick thing about that, just so we're on it. At the very bottom of the same page, it also says the same thing, except it says to the town clerk treasurer.
Yeah, I'm not
Is
sure.
there a reason that's there, or?
I believe Ron just felt like, I can't, I'm not sure exactly, but I think he was just trying to re-emphasize very clearly that it was in two places, because one kind of talks about it generally and the other says the disclosure required by this section shall provide the following. I don't think that's any harm. It is repetitive.
Also the term though.
Just as a reminder, the position of town manager does not exist in the town charter.
The bar
Okay.
holds both titles.
Yeah,
Right, okay, well.
yeah,
fine.
that's why I believe he did that.
I know we had made some mention about that, so I just wanted to be sure before we.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's why. And then if you look at on the same page, if you look at C, paragraph, so it says, it begins, the disclosure required by the section shall provide the following. If you look at the second paragraph, the last sentence of that was added, which is saying generally the right of way is 50 feet wide. However, that distance varies from street to street and sometimes from lot to lot. And then if you go down to the next paragraph, you'll see that there is now a reference to say copies of right-of-way maps can be reviewed on the town's website. So I believe that incorporated all the changes you had requested as part of introduction.
And I will share that at the last Arboretum Committee meeting in February, the committee expressed as a whole their endorsement of this language related to the trees in the town right of way.
Right.
Any other questions about this?
Are those maps posted?
They are.
Oh, good.
They don't show any gates though.
Hmm?
They don't show, the maps don't show any gates.
Yeah.
You're not gonna crack a smile or anything. You're just gonna. Yeah, you're tough. All right, we get a motion to adopt ordinance number 2024-2.
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2024-2.
You are.
And I'll second it, and you even know the language.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That was everybody. And, the,
I wonder if Matilda showed up for the,
She did, I'm sure.
for the gate discussion and doesn't know that it
oh,
moved very early.
oh, Matilda. We have some people, some chat. Should we look at that?
Let me look. Yeah, sorry.
She's asked what her position is.
She's a resident.
Tell her we're sending her a survey.
Yeah, the only message that had been in chat was Donna saying, thanks to you all for your commitment to the town. Good night.
So Matilda, we moved the discussion about the gate up to early part of the meeting because we had several residents make presentations about it. And where we landed was that that Assistant Town Manager Caleb Bucher and Councilmember Todd Eisenstadt will work to build a survey so that we can get a sense of how residents think about what they think about the gate. You know, we did not take any action tonight. We gathering more information. They're in the packet, the email packet that went out with the notification about this meeting had had a few pages of background information on how the gate got there and how it's been affirmed over the years. So I hope that answers your question, or,
I don't think she's there.
okay, no, what? What's it say? Okay.
Thanks for letting us know.
I could read that. Thank you so much, Matilda.
Yeah, she just said, thank you for letting her know.
Sure. Okay, so last substantive item on the list is new business, updating the town charter. So Todd, are we going to update the town charter? Are we going to discuss this right now? No, I'm kidding. I'm just saying, like, shall we dig in? Let's start. Page 1.
Yeah.
Page 1.
I've got my notes here. No.
So we,
Your
Uh,
enthusiasm.
absolutely. This is one of those things. This actually was one of the first things that I volunteered to do in May of 2013. And I didn't get it done. So I super impressed that you are willing to throw yourself on the grenade on this.
Hasn't been done yet.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
So anyway,
well, you and I at the Maryland Municipal League
Right.
talked about this a little
Right.
bit last summer. And it just seems like the charter has a lot of room for updating at the least and perhaps broader editing. So it seemed like the plan that we talked about, and then we talked about with some of the other communities, right? We were both in
Yeah.
some discussions with people who had done it, who said that it took, in some cases over a year.
mhm,
I envision a shorter time, and I envision hopefully talking to each of the council members, the city the town managers, other stakeholders like the Bugle reporter, some of the committee members who may have opinions, and then looking at what seems to be a good or a starting point, which is the Maryland Municipal League and some of the other, the national organization, which has some advice on this, and then to bring back some proposals and then add other proposals which will emerge, no doubt, hopefully with, if needed, a meeting or a hearing to discuss this, hopefully in the summer. I mean,
I'm so sorry.
Like August, maybe?
Summer.
Yes. So
The summer of my discontent.
So it seems to me that there are kind of two aspects to updating it. One is just sort of fixing the language and making it, but then there are other elements of it that are like, hey, do we want to look at things like duration of council member terms or
Sure.
substantive things? And so those,
It's all out there.
it's all out there, but I think that it can be tackled, like you say, not quickly, but it doesn't have to feel like this huge, most enormous project. I mean, we just need to identify the,
Yeah.
not gonna be. We sort of identified the elements that need discussion and input. And
But
then,
yeah, it is a time to reopen some of these basic issues about, council member terms, mayoral terms, authorities.
Town manager.
Whether we should have a town manager exist in the document.
Right.
And a treasurer.
Yeah,
I mean, so what is what's your thinking? Are you going to come to us with, here are 10 substantive changes that we might want to consider? Or how do you, what's your thinking about?
I guess my thinking is to do a listening tour. I mean, just ask people, each of you will be consulted.
So you want us to read the
individually.
charter?
Say what?
You're asking us to read the charter and do homework,
It's not that-
more homework?
But, you know, at some point, we will all, I don't know how many changes we need. I mean, it depends on what people say. I'm not really going into this with an agenda. I mean, I just wanted, it just looks antiquated, and indeed it was confirmed that it hadn't been updated since the mid-1950s. The code has general code consulting, right, which did a good bit of
Right.
work for us, although that could also use some updating. I mean, some of the language is kind of 20th century in there too, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, I don't know if that may be a separate project. I don't want to talk too much here. Unless someone else wants to do that.
I have a question. As part of the code update, did we by any chance get any kind of product that would give us a starting point for the charter review in terms of inconsistencies
Oh, you mean like a legal?
between the charter?
Consulting?
They looked at, you may recall that they had flagged issues such as inconsistencies with some of the fines and penalties where there was conflicting language within the charter itself as well as between the charter and the code. So there were a few of those issues.
Have to look at those again.
Yeah,
And there's a boilerplate.
I can send that to
I
you.
mean, there's,
Yeah.
there's series of boilerplates at some of these municipal associations, and certainly the mayor, thanks, you sent me a link and all.
Yeah,
So maybe if everyone, I mean, I don't know how much people wanna
Dig in.
engage or just wait and see. I mean, we can troubleshoot, I mean, certainly there will be discussion. My view is that, maybe let's put it this way, my work will be done this summer. I mean, the council may have a lot of opinions, and we may have to deliberate about things if they emerge that, you know, people want to talk about.
The residents have opinions too. There's three of us that were veterans of when election sections were redone in both the ordinance and the charter. And that was what, like 3-4 meetings and lots of public dialogue. So it's just like, we probably should buckle seatbelts to kind of be ready for that on a fair amount of issues that
Would it
come up.
I have-
be useful to have a special meeting? I mean,
Not
a
at the
work
beginning,
meeting
not at the beginning.
Not to be.
I have a
After,
proposal.
after identifying issues.
So how about this? How about anybody who's interested in working on this? Let's do something informal where we look through, not to make decisions, but to identify topics that we envision are worth review. So for example, quorum. Well, you know what? 3 members for council constitute a quorum. I don't see that controversial. I don't see there's any reason to consider that. So,
Unless,
can
unless
cross that
people
out,
want
but-
to change the number of members.
oh my God.
Oh, God.
But
Well, some of those things maybe,
But I'm just saying, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, if we identified, and then multiple people, so we have multiple eyes,
Yeah.
just to identify which are the things so that we can basically cross off, okay, we don't have to look at 78.11,
Right.
but not for anything substantive other than just, I can see how somebody might want this to be different.
It can be substantive if you have
Right.
experience or opinions or anything.
But I'm just saying, like, keep it in the family for the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Keep it internal, and then do you want to discuss before we go to the community?
I'm
and
not-
see?
Well,
See
let's see what
what-
we come up with.
Yeah, okay.
But
Okay.
first,
I would personally like somebody, Todd or Barb, or
Somebody.
some person
somebody's not you.
to tell us,
To give you an update.
to tell us what they would propose are the things that need to be updated and addressed.
and that's what I was saying,
Yeah.
is that
So somebody gives us an outline.
So Lisa's not volunteering to be part of this
I'm
little
not.
subgroup,
You're not-
but that's the idea.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the idea, is like, look through this and what,
Right,
What
all right,
needs
so
to
I've
be
got a track change document.
Right.
oh, so.
I think, I would recommend against the track change.
Yeah.
That's your first version.
They could be just highlighted, right? Yeah.
All right.
All right, sure. Okay.
One
Okay.
question I do have, which may play into this or not. It seems like in '01, we made a whole lot of either changes or readoptions. I'm not 100% sure what, and I was wondering what all that was about, because if you look at this thing,
Were
it's
you here? I mean, were you?
No.
no, I wasn't on. Nope, I've been around, but not that.
Bill was born in '02.
504 in this.
So what time frame were you talking about? when
So
that
it was like, if you look, hang on a second, let me just put my thing. It was, there were a lot of things made, I just want to make sure.
2001.
The right,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
April.
I'm sorry, it was 4/26/71. It seems like I think,
1971?
right, but.
That's older than me.
But what I'm saying is that there seemed to be like a lot, like all these resolutions, there's like 4/26/71, and I'm wondering like what happened in.
I can have
What are we
clar-
missing?
Yeah, I can, either, the way charter amendments work is they are adopted, as some of you know, by resolution. There is a very prescribed process under state law, in terms of what happens then. So it's not just your enactment of a resolution. There is then a period of time before they can take effect, because residents have the right to basically object and have actually kind of a referendum on any proposed charter changes.
I'm just wondering if there's like
If there's
meeting
some-
minutes or something.
I'll have
can
Claire
see.
next time she's in, ask if, I mean, I can probably pull the resolutions, but see if she can find anything in the minutes that provides any context of what was going on then.
Right, I mean,
Um,
maybe it was a reaffirmation for all we know, I don't know, but I'm just thinking maybe because that number appears very frequently, and I'm just wondering what happened. Can we get any insight from it?
Sure, I'll ask
Yeah.
Claire if she can help me with that.
I was always wondered the same thing. I wonder if there was like a big scrub back then of kind of cleaning up
Yeah, cleaning it
19th
up.
century back then. Now we're doing it again.
Oh, show
Yeah.
not allow thy horse to poop on the street.
No, that was still in there.
Does anybody want to volunteer to, I will volunteer. You're welcome. Lisa. But I will vote to read through this and
I'll
leave
look at
notes
it.
back and,
All right.
yeah.
I'll skim
Phil?
through. I'll look at it too.
I mean, it doesn't, like at this point, we're just kind of like, not deep dive, but just kind of like,
Yeah.
what do you see? So we don't.
Right, 2 cups of coffee, one
So-
for each. Yeah.
So you're just, right now, we're just gathering impressions
Yeah,
among ourselves.
of what we will then develop into, like a formula for, these are the 10 issues we want to discuss and come up with a plan for how to discuss them.
Do you want to create a list?
Sure.
And-
You want to do this individually? Do you want to get together? We'll take care of this.
We'll do.
They're laughing at us over there
We can
because.
do a list on the email.
We would like to propose that you call it the Garrett Park Charter Book Club, since it sounds like that's going to be the starting concept before you do the deep dive. You're going to read, you're going to discuss, you're going to highlight some broad themes, and then your peers will
Garrett
react.
Park Charter Book.
Just not as fun as your regular book club.
Yeah,
So
with
let's,
no line.
Yeah, well, you could.
all right.
Yeah.
So we don't have to decide now that format, but I mean, except I guess, do you want to meet to do this, or do you want to just sort of work through it individually and then compile it and then discuss?
Both, we could do one first.
Why don't we meet, why don't we discuss, compile and discuss?
There you go.
And then we'll meet eventually.
Right.
I'm talking about our
Next
book club.
meeting- Oh, the book club.
No, like
Oh,
the 4 of us who are willing to volunteer.
Yeah, just remember, if you are discussing matters of policy, that is a meeting that has to be posted under Maryland law.
More than 2 people.
If you have 3 council members, because that
If we're talking
constitutes a
about policy,
quorum.
but if we're not talking about
I
policy, but I
believe
realize
your
it's-
discussions are leading to possible policy.
Council members.
Okay,
You can have,
we'll make this work.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Todd,
If
for,
we have 2 council members, it's not.
you're fine. You can have 2 council members and the mayor, and you're good.
thank you, Todd, for getting us
Can
started.
I just say, I
Please.
just want to be an advocate for open meetings. We shouldn't shy away from an open meeting. Look how many people show up for your meeting. Advertising a meeting and holding it. I don't think we should shy away from that. I'm just gonna say
I
that.
mean, when we have an idea of what we want to propose.
Right, but not everything is a meeting. I mean, the discussions. I hear you.
You can have wine and no
Okay.
meeting.
The time is 9:34.
So
Yes.
just, so we can't have a listserv then, I take it.
Not
For
really.
this. for
No,
the-
you
for the
cannot.
book club.
No,
Who's gonna be the other council member? Because I think
No, I think
Phil?
I think Steve was willing to do it too.
Steve is willing
I was
to-
gonna just do a scrum. Yeah.
All right.
That's
Call it-
kind of mostly.
Can the
what-
rest of you email suggestions?
Yeah, if somebody gives it to me to read it.
I think it's in the.
In the packet.
It's in the packet.
It's the last item in the packet.
Okay,
Like notable absences, things that are misstated and outdated.
Todd?
What else?
No, I was just gonna say, you know, as I think was sort of alluded to, you know, at one point, the Maryland Municipal League had a model charter. It had no force of law, and that's what our charter is based on. I had provided Todd with a copy of the National Civic League's
Yes.
model charter, and either I can send that out, Todd, or if you want to do that, but I would suggest that that be sent out to the group just as food for thought.
Kayla, can you send me a copy of the charter in a Word document or something I can write on and then email back?
We have it in PDF. I can try to convert it, but I did that on a very simple document earlier today, and it
I think I can convert PDF.
yeah, I can do it. It just sometimes the formatting doesn't carry over and it looks a little wonky, but I can send it to you in Word.
It would just be easier. than-
Sure.
Maybe the three of us meet next week or something, just brainstorm.
You, me and Joanna, or you, the three of us? Sure,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
sure.
Just we,
Yeah, we can do that.
I'll meet.
Okay, let's do it. Okay,
Yep, we can do that.
okay,
Okay.
excellent.
Meet online.
We'll make it work. Okay,
Okay.
time is 9:35, and I'm gonna.
Your turn.
Great.